Good evening and welcome to the Sound Off Show. My name is Linda Kirker. I host the program, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's been an interesting time. I guess it's always an interesting time these days, but I wanted to mention the hurricanes down south, and certainly our prayers go out to all of those folks who are now struggling, some just to get back to a home. I spoke with my sister-in-law this afternoon. They have no power at their house. I mean, that's not nearly as bad a problem as a lot of other people are having with their houses torn apart. And so I ask you to offer up prayers. And isn't it amazing how our military and our rescue teams, our first responders, our firemen, police, just so many people have come together in this country like you may not see anywhere else, because we are basically good people who care about one another. And I ask you not to be distraught, which I get to be myself sometimes, when the negativism flows into our world that we live in, and we struggle because of the lack of morality and the lack of so many things that were traditionally a part of the founding of this country. And I'm going to once again just ask you to be an active person in this country, in our state, in our communities. Looks like somebody has a phone call. I hope it's a good one. Anyway, I guess it's ringing out here for a reason, to keep me awake maybe, I don't know. But we have a lot of challenges in this country right now, in the world. And in my humble or not so humble view, it's going to take we the people as individuals pulling together and standing up for the foundation of this country that has given us freedom and opportunity and rights. Those are going to go away, folks, if we don't stand up and fight to keep them. Edmund Burke said, "All that is necessary for evil to triumph is that good men and women do nothing." And so I ask you, what are you doing to stand up for the principles of this country so that our children and grandchildren will have the rights and opportunities and the freedoms that we grew up with? Also, I wanted to share, let's see, who does this come from? Noah Webster, one of the founding fathers of the United States of America, said, listen carefully, please. If the citizens neglect their duty and place unprincipled men in office, men and or women, the government will soon be corrupted. If government fails to secure public prosperity and happiness, it must be because the citizens neglect the divine commands and elect bad men and women to make and administer the laws. And one more, we have wrongly allowed the very principles which produced morality and virtue, and thus national stability, to be restricted in public life. I do have a guest, and I'm going to introduce her in a minute, but I want to share one more thing. These are some of my thoughts. Now is the time. Now is the time. We are slowly losing the power of the people given to us by the founders. The real problems will come, and there will be no returning to the promise of individual freedom, rights, and opportunity. Christians today are compromising our values and our faith to no good end. The door is opened by us to beliefs foreign to our beliefs. Evil forces will fill the void of our neglect of religious values and our responsibilities as Americans. We must empower ourselves and don the armor of Christianity, spirituality, our Constitution. We need to face our national challenges head on. Our mission today is not easy. We, the people, are the power with our Lord as the foundation of our strength. Please think about that. You need to stand up and speak out and not let the forces that are actively destroying our culture to continue. We need to fight back, folks, and I'm asking you to do that. I'm willing, I try, and I try to do my best, but it's going to take all of us. Okay, with that, I'm going to reintroduce my guest, who hasn't been here for a little while, Mary Beerworth. Welcome back, my friend.
Nice to see you, Linda. Thanks for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. I'm always happy to have you on the show. Mary is the Executive Director of the Vermont Right to Life Committee?
Yes,
yes.
Committee. Yeah.
Committee. And is a wealth of knowledge. And I always enjoy having you on the program because I learn.
Well, it's always fun to be here. Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome. So what's new? What's new at the State House, or what's new with Vermont Right to Life? I'm sure there's a lot going on.
Well, I would like to talk a little bit about the State House because Vermont Right to Life has always been concerned about parents' rights and responsibilities, especially when it comes to their minor daughter possibly procuring an abortion without their parents' knowledge and consent.
I remember
or
that.
Consent, yes, and you were very actively involved in that. But and we nearly passed that law the year you were in the State House. One of the years you were in the State House. We passed it in the House, and it got held up in the Senate. And so parents need to know that still to this day, they will not be notified or informed if their daughter is undergoing a surgical procedure as serious as an abortion, and that may be under pressure from an older boyfriend, some kind of family member acting inappropriately, any number of things. It's very serious. But since then, that was 2001, when we had a big game going to try to get that into law, as almost every other state has done at this point. There have been even more attempts to destroy the parent-child relationship in the State House.
That's a global thing.
It's very, very serious, and they've gone further into taking away parental rights. And I think people need to know that Act 35 was passed and signed into law this past year. It is consent by minors for mental health care. Anything that a child thinks they want counseling for, they can now obtain without involving their parent. Now, they ostensibly wanted that so that if a child was feeling suicidal, they would be able to immediately get care. But this is for the whole broad range of things that may be facing your minor child. Now, where will they go and who will they see? I have very little doubt that it's the school nurse and then potentially Planned Parenthood that will be advising our children and grandchildren on matters from sexuality to gender confusion to suicide to abortion. And I mean, it's not like a child can access the best counselors in the state on their own if they don't have a driver's license and don't know where to go. But where do they always know where to go? Planned Parenthood has clinics near every school. Pretty much. They have 12 clinics in the state, and that puts them pretty well in every county. And their idea of substitute parenting isn't something most parents would agree with. Their advice is not something that most parents would want them giving their children.
This blows my mind.
It does.
You know, granted, I will say that there are families that are very dysfunctional. Some children do not have solid parenting, but there must be someone else, an aunt, an uncle, a supportive teacher or neighbor or somebody who could guide them, but they don't have legal authority to do anything. But when a child, there are so many aspects to this, Mary. I'm thinking of a young person who gets into marijuana. And I was going to ask you before we even talked before the show, do you think that with the expansion of the use of marijuana and potentially recreational legislation for use, that plays a part in young girls getting pregnant?
Well, we're very, very concerned. I mean, our issues as the executive director of Vermont Right to Life, our issues are abortion, infanticide, the killing of a baby after being born, and the euthanasia, assisted suicide and euthanasia of old people. However, it's very concerning to us because a single puff of marijuana can have a detrimental effect on a developing unborn child. And I'm very concerned because I think we've done one thing successfully in this country, and that is a girl who's pregnant knows she can't drink alcohol without having an adverse effect on her baby. But marijuana is famous for dealing with nausea. So you think you're a little nauseated, you might have a couple puffs of a marijuana joint. It's very lethally. The residue and the effects on that unborn child are powerfully negative. So it's very concerning.
And then we wonder why we have so many children who have developmental,
but also a pre-prescribed, pre-tendency to want to get into drugs and an addiction episode. It's very, very serious. No one's talked about it, and we really need to start looking at what this means. Yeah.
I think so. Parental rights. Mary, I don't know how much you get into the global picture, but the United Nations wants to deprive parents of their decision-making for their children, the care of their children. And that I find that just so disturbing.
It's a very fundamental problem, and it's gotten worse here in the state of Vermont. I understand that some parents are not good parents, but parents have the rights and the responsibility for the care and guidance of their children. And when you take that away from them and don't hold them responsible, there's only one place to go. It'll get worse. Yeah. And I feel sorry, and I'm really sad for children because there's nothing worse than having secrets from your parents. Bad parents, good parents, in-between parents, secrets in a household are very damaging. And if a child's in distress on any level and seeking mental health counseling, a minor doesn't understand how to seek the best care, right? I mean, that is a parent's rights, that is a parent's responsibility to make sure they have found the right counselor for their child. And that is now being taken away from them. A child will be able, as of this year, to come home to a household a stranger to their parents, dealing with issues that the parents know nothing about.
And then wondering what's going on with the child. And oh my goodness, there are so many ramifications to that. Mental distress and fear.
Absolutely.
Especially with a pregnancy. I mean, sooner or later, it's going to be evident unless they go the route of Planned Parenthood and get an abortion. And then that has its own negative effects.
That has its own negative effects. So we're joining with some parents who are very, very concerned about this new trend in the State House to kind of remove parental rights and trying to alert parents to be aware. And it's time to start asking your school system, well, if you're going to be dealing with our child and letting mental health counselors approach our child without our knowledge and consent, they have accountability. So it's important that parents find out what their school nurse, what the principal, what do they think about all this, and how are they going to deal with it? And, you can pass laws in the State House, and that's what they've been doing, but you can pass it, and it can be signed into law. But the fact is, you can't strip parental rights. Our Vermont Constitution and our national Constitution hold that parents are responsible for the care of their children.
And what kind of a person would want to be responsible for the health of a child especially if it involves a pregnancy and a potential abortion? I can't imagine. I mean,
Well, see, this is my concern. I would believe that most good psychiatric counseling professional folks probably would not do that. And so where then do they turn?
They would not do what?
Involve themselves in a minor without the parental
Oh,
involvement.
that's what I'm saying. People,
Licensed professionals, I would think, would say, no, it's not my job.
and so in order to perform an abortion, you don't have to be a licensed professional?
You don't have to be a physician in the state of Vermont to perform an abortion. In fact, Planned Parenthood routinely uses non-physicians, including nurse practitioners, nurse midwives, and physician assistants.
The whole idea just repulses me. You know where I was and where I am now. I just feel that this is a tough thing to say. But I feel that except for maybe a mother's life being in jeopardy, to perform an abortion is taking a life. And it's like ISIS beheading a person. It's taking a life. And
that's science, Linda. You're not going out somewhere on a limb. That's just basic science. Of all the science that's in dispute these days about climate change and other things, there's no dispute about when life begins. Life begins at the moment of conception. The heart begins to beat just 24 days after that conception, before you even really know you're pregnant. And so we're dealing with solid fact, indisputable fact, that actually, positions a woman to feel a tremendous amount of regret later in life, because especially if she hasn't heard before the abortion, she finds it out afterward. That's a life, and it was her baby. And so we're dealing with a lot of women who have a lot of issues around their abortions.
And so we get to the point of, I'll call it morality or wisdom or excuse me, understanding, respect for yourself. I really think we know that Planned Parenthood gets into the schools.
Yes.
And that I'm against wholeheartedly. Because, wait a minute, I have a question.
Sure.
What the heck how can they be called Planned Parenthood when they very often take a life? What is that? That's not parenthood.
Planned unparenthood, I guess, is what some people call it. Anyway, yeah, you're right. You're right to be questioning who they are and why they are in our school system. And it started in the early 1970s under President Jimmy Carter, because they got the federal funds. They got the federal family planning funding. And that legitimized their organization and gave the government imprimatur to Planned Parenthood. And then they began to design and implement sexuality courses that would raise the hair on most parents' heads. Instead of like a cautionary tale or a promotion of abstinence, or at least an offering of abstinence education, they are 100% opposed to abstinence education, and they're more of a how-to, why-to, or skill set for the earliest of children getting involved in sexuality.
I know, pictures
everything
of sexual acts and all kinds of things. What are we doing? These children should be riding bicycles and playing hopscotch, and roller skating or whatever it is they like to do these days. But to be indoctrinated
that's exactly the right word.
Into sexuality when you're in the elementary grades is just something that, why aren't we, folks, I'm speaking to you, why are we not at the school board meetings saying, why do you allow this? What is happening here? I just wanted to share this. This came from True North Reports. Mm-hmm. I just printed it out. The federal government is spending $138,000 to ask preschoolers about their gender identity. We're off the cliff, folks, with all of this. It's called the National Science Foundation is spending $138,000 to gain a deeper understanding of the internal sense of gender identity of 4-year-old children. Give me a break. This is all intentional.
It is intentional.
It is disgusting. And you know, I firmly believe, without anything to back it up, it's an instinct, and often I'm right, that there is a desire to push children into alternative sexuality.
Exactly. Into questioning their, yes, absolutely.
Questioning who they are.
Yeah.
You know what? I have a friend, this is a personal story. I have a friend who knows someone who was a young little girl, maybe 5 years old, and she was in school, and there was talk about sexual boys versus girls, or are you one of these, or are you a girl, are you a boy? And the little girl that night got out of the bathtub, and her hair was wet and it was all pulled back, and she looked in the mirror and she said, "Mommy, I don't want to be a boy." She thought she looked like a boy because her hair was back. How sad is that? It makes me cringe.
I know. I'm sorry to tell you, but Planned Parenthood is behind a lot of promoting the questioning of your gender. And I believe that most likely they were behind this Act 35 and that encroachment on parents' rights and the ability for Planned Parenthood to have greater and greater access to our children. I do want you to know, if parents out there listening, you're not going to probably be able to walk into a school system and find Planned Parenthood's name on some sexuality education. However, they train the educators. That's what they do. They find a way to make sure that their brand of sexuality under Guttmacher Institute, under Planned Parenthood, under a various number of disguises, that their brand of sexuality education surfaces. It is not what parents would want for their children, and it is never. If abstinence is mentioned, it's usually to make fun of it.
You know, Mary, I'm glad you brought that up, because I have seen from time to time, read that teachers were having training sessions. And I thought, why? They know their subject matter, but that's all been kind of torn apart. And, in order to get, they don't even teach U.S. history anymore. It's social studies, okay? So no wonder our children don't know about the founding of their country.
And they don't know the Constitution, which, if I can slip in, I'd like to remind everyone that the founding document of our country is the Declaration of Independence, and that is where the terms that we the people and the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is why we took the name Vermont Right to Life, because it's the first right. It's the first right. It's the right that you have to have before you can pursue life, liberty. Before you can pursue liberty or happiness, you have to have your basic essential right to life.
And Mary, the sad thing about all these things that we're talking about is that there is so much goodness out there. There's so much that a young person can do to develop themselves with the right guidance, okay? I will say quickly that I don't think, if I told you this, stop me. A few months back, I was invited for the second time to speak to the 7th and 8th graders locally. And it was one of the most wonderful things I've ever done. I loved every second of it. And I received many, many letters of thanks. And I'm grateful to the administration for allowing me to have that opportunity, for the teacher to invite me, because the students were so receptive and responsive. And I think we don't speak enough to young people about the realities of life and the opportunities.
In a very positive way.
In a very positive way. And even about how life will smack you in the face sometimes. And then you have a choice to make. Am I going to sink or am I going to swim?
Rise to the challenge or not.
Exactly. And so anyway, I don't want to.
And let me take that opportunity, Linda, to say that I think in Franklin County, teachers are very wise, and I think that the children and their parents are very. So when I speak in broad terms about Planned Parenthood and the intrusion into family life, I'm not sure that applies to some of the
Everywhere.
counties like Franklin County, because it's really got some solid folks, and the school systems seem very solid and positive. So it is a general thing that's creeping into the atmosphere, and certainly legislatively these things are happening. But that doesn't mean that good teachers, good school nurses, and good principals aren't out there.
I often have been heard to say, despite what I see going on in the overall schools, Common Core, which is a disaster, I think there are many, many wonderful teachers out there.
They really
but
are.
they are caught in a system
Yes.
that, and so are the students.
Right.
And it's only we the people who
And
can
the parents
change that.
who can change that. Yeah.
That's right.
So that was one thing I was hoping you would allow me to touch on. And
Sure.
there was a lot of dismay in the State House, and the push for this legislation, this Act 35, to strip parents of their rights to know what's happening with their children, had, out of 150 legislative votes, only 12 voted no. 12.
In the House. Wow. And is that on, you folks may remember from a previous guest on the program, Rob Roper of the Ethan Allen Institute, there is a, what do they call it, legislative voting
Yes.
record. Now, that's a recent vote,
That's a recent vote. This was just this past year.
but it should be on there.
It'll be on. You can look it up by the name of, you can go on the legislative website, which is leg.state.vt.us, and then search by your legislator, and you can see their voting record. And it was House Bill 230, which is now Act 35. But it's, anyway, it's just a little dismaying, and it's encroaching, and it's all part of a broader picture to ensure that we can never pass a law that requires parents be notified if their minor child is having a surgical procedure. I also want to be very clear that this Act 35 involves counseling, not prescription drugs, just counseling. But it's a step toward that eventual stripping of parental rights. We've already passed laws that say minors can make informed consent decisions about who they have sexual activity with, where once upon a time, if you had a sexual act, performed a sexual act with a minor, it was statutory rape. They've expanded the window so that older men can be in relationships with younger girls.
What?
Yes.
That's in this bill?
No, not in this bill. That's another step along the way of this process of allowing minors to assume more and more rights over their own care while they live in the household where the parents are paying for their insurance and trying to provide for them and all the things that parents have to do. So
The moral decay
The moral
of a society.
yes. And as you know, Vermont is the ground where you come and try new things, and then it's a springboard for other states.
Yeah, well, I have other issues about what's going on in the state, but I'll keep those silent for the moment. But they'll come up another day. You can count on it, folks. Assisted suicide.
Right. And euthanasia. And Vermont, again, was the third state to allow assisted suicide. It's been legal now since 2013. But there's been some success on that front. There was a court challenge. No state so far has, well, let me take you back. The debate on the floor was all about choice, that it would be a doctor and a nurse's choice to be involved in assisted suicide, and that the patient would have choices and not feel pressured, okay? To that end, the other Oregon and Washington ensured that there was no affirmative duty for a physician or nurse to inform a patient of the law. They recognize that as a subtle form of coercion to say, Linda, you have 6 months left to live. Here are your choices, chemotherapy, drugs, blah, 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 and you can kill yourself. And they recognize that would be a form of pressure on a patient getting distressful news. Well, we had the debate here in Vermont. It was all about choice. It was all about choice. And then the minute the law went into effect, the pro-assisted suicide folks said there's an affirmative duty to inform. Everybody has to tell every terminally ill patient that they have the choice to take a lethal dose.
Is that their role?
That's what they said, yes. So there was a Vermont Alliance for Ethical Healthcare took the case to court and challenged that there was an affirmative duty to inform in the law, that it was a violation of a doctor's and nurse's conscience who didn't want to be involved in the law. The case was dismissed, but the judge ruled that there is no affirmative duty to inform a patient on the behalf of a doctor. Okay? Very important. Now, doctors are out there doing this, but we need to get the word out that they do not have to do that. Okay? They were told for 4 years they had to inform a patient of the choice. Now that's gone. It's stripped out.
So whose responsibility is it to ensure that the doctors know this?
Well, that's the big problem. But I'm here today so we can tell the people listening tonight that there is no affirmative duty to inform, and hopefully that word will get out to the public, that that's a change in the law.
So what about there must be a medical association in Vermont?
Yes, and it's very alarming that the Vermont Medical Society is actually trying to do what they can to reinstitute a policy that doctors must inform their patients. So it's very discouraging because there's no question we have talked to patients who have felt pressured into taking those drugs by the very mention of it. Being confronted when you're dealing with stressful issues about your own life.
You're vulnerable.
Very vulnerable. I spoke to one woman who really got weak. She was very ill, and she said, I really thought about taking the drugs, and she decided she needed to get home and help take care of her husband who was struggling with his own issues, and that was 4 years ago. So she was offered those drugs when she was not ultimately going to die. So
Wow.
very distressing. She felt she was very angry about it. So the other good news is that 23 other states have taken up in this last year assisted suicide laws, and they all failed in 23 different
Wow.
states. Yes. And then most recently, the New York Supreme Court decided that not only was there no right in the Constitution to assisted suicide, that laws prohibiting assisted suicide had value in protecting the most vulnerable people in the state.
Well, good for them.
Yes.
Good for them. I noticed that the phone number is not on the screen. I'm wondering if that can be put up there. So in case anyone has a desire to call, let me see, is it 527-6449? I think so. I think that's what it is. I used to know. 527. Oh dear. I don't know if they're listening in the control room, but I guess not. Can we get a phone number on the screen?
527-6449.
I was right. The number is 527-6449. If you have an interest in calling and posing a question or making a comment, we'd love to hear from you.
And while we're giving out numbers, if anyone's interested in the Vermont Right to Life Committee, we are a statewide nonprofit organization. We have chapters in several counties across the state, but we're always looking for people to join, people to get in touch with us. And so you can find us on the web. Just look us up, Vermont Right to Life Committee, and they'll take you to our website and contact information.
Vermont Right to Life Committee. Simple.
Simple.
Well, I know how busy you are, Mary. I can only imagine. Now, are you at the State House a lot during the legislative session?
During the legislative session, yes. And we moved our office actually 200 steps from the State House. We're right on Baldwin Street, so we have really close access to the State House now in a beautiful space.
Good.
So during the legislative session, we have a presence there every day, and we'll have a lobby day. Coming up in 2018, we'll have a lobby day on May 2nd. We'll also have different events throughout the year that people can join us and come anytime and give me a call ahead of time, and we'll make sure you get a tour of the State House.
You'll have to, yeah, I haven't been down there in
You've got to
a
come.
number of years. So if I know you're not going to remember this, but if you have a chance to remind me of the date, I have a friend who says, come down and I have room for you to stay.
Oh, wonderful.
You know, and I keep meaning to do it, But the thing is, I seem to have never gotten the message that I retired 14 years ago.
14 years ago, you're a good advertisement for keeping my job because you don't look anywhere near retired.
Oh, yes, I do. But thank you. Now, let's see what else we have here.
I did want to share some information that
Good.
we recently got. Planned Parenthood has been solely responsible for nearly all the abortions in the state of Vermont since 1974, I would say.
Do you know how many have been done?
Well, yeah, they've done over the entire spread of those years till now, over 90,000 abortions have been performed in Vermont. So that's
What?
yeah, in Vermont alone. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, it comes to about, recently the numbers have dropped considerably. They've dropped all over the country by incredible amount. I mean, Planned Parenthood clinics are closing in a lot of states because of a lot of scandal surrounding Planned Parenthood and their organization and their practices.
Oh, yes.
And it's been taken a big bite out because nationally they perform a third of all abortions across the country. They have a chain of abortion clinics unlike anybody else, okay? They are the abortions are us, is what we call them. And they have been that way in Vermont. Very few abortions are performed in doctors' offices and very few abortions are performed in hospitals. But, however, that being said, a former CEO for Planned Parenthood is now on the UVM Medical Center's board of directors.
Oh, my.
And they have successfully, we understand, gotten a $1.5 million grant to open a separate abortion teaching facility. So, in all these years past, Planned Parenthood has been the arm of the UVM Medical Center. In other words, they have sent their medical students who want to learn to do abortions down to Planned Parenthood to be trained by the non-physicians there in how to do these procedures. So now they want a separate abortion facility at the UVM Medical Center that will train and teach doctors and nurses to be involved in abortions. So it's alarming news because there's a fairly aggressive genetic department and there's always ongoing testing for, unborn babies who may have tested positive for Down syndrome and et cetera. And now there will be a neat path over to getting an abortion right there at their facility as we understand it. We're trying to get more information. We're still looking for new numbers, but I think there's no way to avoid guessing that there will be more abortions, more abortion doctors, more abortion nurses, more late-term abortions, and more abortions on babies who have somehow tested.
So, in other words, Mary, you're saying that while the baby's in the womb, they can test for
yes,
various, what do I want to call them?
Oh, so much as a cleft palate or a club foot or
Really?
Yes, to even more serious things. But see, so in Vermont, abortion is legal right throughout pregnancy for any reason at all, or no reason.
Right up to 9 months.
Right up to 9 months. However, it's been difficult to find abortionists who will do those late-term abortions. Now with the new surgical center, so Planned Parenthood will go up to 19 weeks, and then they start taking you out of state to get those later-term abortions. My fear is that a surgical center will be handling later and later abortions right here in Vermont.
And who pays for these abortions?
Well, we, the taxpayers, pay for a third of all abortions. Anyone who is considered low income in Vermont gets an abortion on the state. That's by court order. The Dyer decision in 1986 said that we must pay for anyone whose abortion is low income. And then we have the Dr. Dinosaur program, which allows a woman to count her unborn child as a family member and make a higher income for her family and still use the funds to get an abortion.
Oh, my God.
Well, it is pretty grim. It really is. So, So out of about 1,200 abortions a year.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I got that. A woman who's pregnant and low income can claim that she has basically another child, even though it's unborn.
Let's say she's single. She now counts herself as a family of two.
Not yet.
She can. They can call the unborn child a member of a family of two, the mother and the baby. and then she can be making more money, and so that she can, let's say she's making $25,000 a year. Maybe it was, I'm not exactly sure of the figures, but let's say at $18,000 by yourself, you're not eligible for the Dr. Dinosaur program, but then you count your unborn child as a family member. Now you're eligible for some of these services, and one of those services is an abortion. I know it's very difficult to.
It's weird.
Yes. And now, on the other hand, she calls herself a family of two, wants to carry that baby to term, then she's eligible for services as well. Okay? So the Dr. Dinosaur program was for pregnant women, but it included abortion services.
I thought the Dr. Dinosaur program was for children.
And she's carrying a child.
No, born children. I thought that's what Dr. Dinosaur was.
And I was in the room when this testimony was taken, and they very clearly, the legislative committee understood what they were doing, and they wanted it that way.
So if you were queen, I always say, if I were
for
queen,
a day anyway.
What programs would you eliminate, in the state? I can think of a ton of them.
Well, number one, and I hope the Trump administration can get it done, is I would cut the funding off to Planned Parenthood. I think
absolutely.
we'd see it now. And I want to just mention this while I have this opportunity. I looked up today, between 2010 and 2013, some of the money that Planned Parenthood has gotten from their privately funded wealthy donors, okay? This is nationwide, not just in Vermont. Warren Buffett, $231 million in a 3-year period. George Soros and his Open Society, $18.4 million.
Oh.
Bill Gates, $14.5 million. William and Flora Hewlett-Packard, $22.8 million. David and Lucille Packard, $16.2 million. And it goes on and on. The Ford Foundation, the Vanguard Charitable Trust. The list is endless. They don't need the government funds. But they want them because it means they're approved of it's like being approved by the FDA. You're approved by the government.
Okay, so what do these individuals have to gain?
Population control, largely. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Now, Planned Parenthood was offered by the Trump administration the opportunity to take the funds and stop doing abortions. In other words, do the real women's health care, contraceptive family planning services, and they flatly turned that down.
Of course, because they make their money through the abortions.
And this is nationwide and internationally. I mean, these people are in Planned Parenthood is in other countries, very heavily involved in the forced family planning, in other words, forced sterilization programs and forced abortion programs.
That's like Hitler, isn't it?
Well, anyone only has to take a quick look at Margaret Sanger, their founder, and she actually went over to study the Nazi project and brought some of those ideas here, and vice versa. They came over to study what she was doing. So, yes, there's no question about it, but it's all in denial. You can't say these things. In fact, Planned Parenthood calls Margaret Sanger St. Margaret, St. Maggie. And you can make, for a $1,000 contribution, you can be get the mat.
A saint?
Yeah, I guess.
Oh.
It's pretty bizarre. And they make movies about Margaret Sanger as if she was the founder of this wonderful organization, but there's no question she had deep roots in population control. She wanted to eliminate the black population. She spoke at Ku Klux Klan organizational meetings. She was heavily involved in programs that they should be ashamed of today. They should be renouncing her. Now, Confederate statues are coming down all over the place. Margaret Sanger's statue should come down from the Black History Museum. Should come down.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She wanted to control
the black population.
Wow. This is like out of some weird novel. That's what it feels like.
I know. I don't know how they've gotten away for so long. And they did try to defund them this past year, and they went down by 1 vote. So, I think that attempt will continue.
Federally?
Federally. Oh, there's no way. Vermont will never cut their funding off. So here in Vermont, Planned Parenthood gets $1.5 million annually from the federal government under the family planning program. And they get an additional $300,000 out of our state budget, not counting paying for abortions for those who meet the poverty or income guidelines. They just get a handout of $300,000 to help with their administrative.
And it's 1.5 million
every year.
feds.
Yeah. They usually try to find a way to get a few $100,000 in grants for special projects. So we're coming very close to saying they make $2 million annually.
Are you comfortable, Mary, briefly perhaps, talking about the videos that were shown of the discussions about the body parts from born and unborn babies? That
I would only be able to talk about unborn babies. I don't have any experience with, I don't think Planned Parenthood's involved with born babies very often in any case, but there are definitely videotapes of them selling baby body parts to those kind of experimental labs that always are looking for human tissue, and they want the youngest and the oldest unborn babies that they can get. And so they were caught, and they still, while the scandal has damaged their reputation, they still have not faced any federal charges. They've been investigated. The request has been made to go further because the evidence is there that that's what they were doing. And yet, in fact, the guy who did the undercover videos is the one who's constantly being threatened with jail time for videotaping the proof of what's going on.
Boy, we have a big job to do in terms of, number one, speaking with young people about, my view is this, I mean, sexual activity when I was growing up, I would never think of it because I didn't want to embarrass my family. First of all, I didn't know anything about it, so that helped. But today there's so much exposure.
Well, I know, and we can blame Planned Parenthood for some of this, but there's no question the television, when you turn on the TV, there is so much sexuality right in our kids' faces that they feel awed for not participating, which is why the need for abstinence education is just huge. And for that, what you talked about earlier, that sense that your future lies ahead of you. And a big mistake on the sexuality front can cost you your future.
One mistake,
Right.
not just this type of mistake, but one big mistake can potentially
Derail.
affect the whole rest of your life. And this could be obviously one of them, but I would love to go with you into some schools and just talk with maybe middle schoolers, 6th through 8th, 5th through 8th, something like that, about how to respect yourself and to think about, the things that are okay and the things that are not okay. And if you put yourself into a position where you have the potential to become pregnant, if you become pregnant, you have an obligation. That's a baby.
And this would be a nice time to put in a plug for the beautiful CareNet Center that's right down the road here, close to this school.
Yes.
And they do a marvelous job backing parents up and helping them with their children. And I also would like to say that I know it's dire and I know it's sad and I know it feels like the future is gone, but we have also witnessed young girls who have pulled their entire lives together for the sake of a baby. We have seen them get off drugs, get out of bad relationships, and just make their life about this child. And it can be we're not advocating it, but
if it happens,
there's a lot of support, and I would encourage people and parents to visit CareNet, make an appointment, go see what they offer, and I would encourage school nurses to take a moment to go visit CareNet and see where they can send children who may need counseling on a whole host of issues.
Definitely. Yeah. In fact, if we could get into a school, that little flyer that you have about the gestation time of a
it's all based on science.
Fetus.
All based on science.
To have each of the kids have one of those and to discuss it, and to have a young woman who did get pregnant and how she dealt with it, and because she knew that was her little baby. and she had the maternal instincts to want to nurture that baby and bring it to life and foster its life, and but also what that journey is like.
And the other journey can be adoption, and that's something we promote in our brochure, because there's new changes to adoption laws that allow a young girl to not just be cut off from a baby she's been torn about, maybe doesn't have the parental support or the father helping, and she has lots of decisions she can make to stay involved with that child's life forever. So
absolutely,
the world has changed for the better, but young girls and young men need to know.
They do. They need the information.
That's right.
What they do with it is up to them. But to know that there are choices out there, and that the decisions that you make along your life's path can affect the rest of your life. And, accidents happen. And, we know that. And then there are decisions.
And what we like to say, Linda, is, that there are ways and support systems out there that help you, that you can make a decision that you and your baby can live with.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that, I don't know if we've seen it here in Vermont, but there's an element, a culture out there in the world that likes to prey sexually on young girls and boys, little children. It makes me sick to my stomach. But, we need to work to make sure that doesn't happen. There's so much sexuality out there, whether it's magazines or movies or your computer, whatever it might be.
I know. Such easy access to disturbing ideas. Yeah.
Yes.
That can corrupt a mind. It's very. Parents today have a big job ahead of them.
Boy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Lead by example.
Yes.
Set expectations. Those are things that my parents, I saw them do for me, and I did it for my children. It's what you've experienced in life. How you've been groomed, so to speak. But it's a whole different culture today from the culture that I grew up in.
And that is because, as we started out talking, Linda, there are forces out there that are undermining the family in a calculated, it's not an accident what's happening, it's calculated to destroy families. And I don't understand 100% of why, but there is an there's an anti-family, anti-parents rights.
The family is the building block of society.
So when you undermine that, I guess
you ruin the culture, you ruin the society. All of this. When I look at this, the federal government spending $138,000 to ask preschoolers.
Even asking is disturbing.
Of
Asking a
course
child
it
a
is.
question like that.
Why what?
And I wonder if parents will be notified that the kids will be asked these questions.
Well, if they're watching this program,
look out.
They know that it's being done, that's for sure. What's happening here, or maybe this is something new and it hasn't started yet, but I think they ought to defund the National Science Foundation if this is the kind of thing they're doing. They're brainwashing our children. They're trying to change who they are. It's just
it's distressing.
Very disheartening.
Yeah.
And, folks, I know this is a different kind of a program tonight, but these are things that we really need to be aware of. And I wish we could have parenting awareness programs.
We really do. We need a parents' rights group to develop, because I think parents are under attack, and it's going to take going to court to overturn some of the steps that have been made.
It's a great idea, Mary, but how do you get them together?
That since this just passed is something we haven't worked out, but I thought it was nice that I had this opportunity to come here and at least warn some of the beautiful parents here in Franklin County who really do care about their kids and their grandkids. And I think that grandparents are very important here.
Boy,
they have children who are trying to raise children, and they haven't got time for all of this and to understand and process it all. They just are going to wake up someday and realize they have no rights left.
I think that grandparents are very
I do.
important in today's society. They've always been important, but even more so today.
I think so too.
They come from, many of us come from a different culture that existed that was healthier, in my view, in many ways. And that's why it's so hard to accept what's going on, to see the decline.
Well, and then two parents working in a family, they have no time to be looking at what happened in the legislature this past year. There was a little segment on it on the news, but you could hardly grasp the reality of what was being said.
What's
it's just a little
behind it.
snippet, yeah, and then you realize, and you don't think it would be your child, you just assume your child is coming to you,
Yeah.
right, for advice.
Yeah.
So very serious times, really, and
Well, I'm glad you're on top of it, Mary. I know how hard you work. You know, I respect you a lot for that, keeping on top of everything. You know, I was going through some papers. I have papers everywhere. And I came across the 2012 Republican National Committee platform.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, did I go to that one? I think I did. Anyway, some of the things that the party stood for, and hopefully still does, what is a family? Definition of a family.
see, that's a big understanding of what's going on out there. Mm-hmm.
Sanctity of life. Education. Parents are responsible for the education of their children. Education is much more than schooling. It is the whole range of activities by which families and communities transmit to a younger generation. Not just knowledge and skills.
Well, that's everything you've said tonight. Yep.
And we've said, but ethical and behavioral norms and traditions. That is the family. School choice is important for all children. So, you know, and then obviously we urge active prosecution against child pornography, religious liberty we want.
And that's also under attack at the State House.
Oh, and in the military. The pastors in the military are being denied the opportunity to even carry a Bible or to refer to Jesus. When you have a military person who's fought for our country and they're minus legs or whatever, and they're traumatized and they need caring support and they're a religious person, what's going to be more comforting to them than to have a pastor come in and talk with them and pray with them? And there are many instances. There was one young woman who had, I think it was on her computer screen, there was just a little saying,
Yep.
a little religious saying, and someone saw that and they dismissed her.
It's just unbelievable. And I do believe that the next step will be to tax church properties if at all possible.
Oh,
So,
there'll be,
yeah.
well, look at all this environmental stuff going on. The energy gurus, you know, I call Al Gore the hoax master, and he is. And and now they want to tax us if we drive a car with gasoline. Are you kidding me?
But people need to know that this stuff may very well happen. But it's not the good folks from Franklin County who represent us. Okay. The good folks here, I mean, really, overall, this county is a positive force for good in the legislature. So they need to stay on top of things, but definitely the attacks are coming from elsewhere.
What bothers me, what are we hearing from them publicly? What have they written in the newspaper? What have they, you know, asked to come on this show and talk about what's happening in Montpelier?
There you go. There's your next guest.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Mary, thank you
Thank you, Linda.
so much for coming on and enlightening the viewers and me about all that's going on that we need to keep tabs on and speak out about. So thank you
I
again.
love coming on your show, Linda. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's great to see you. Folks, I guess we're done. So good night and have a great week. And don't forget, we just had 9/11, and that's quite a reminder of the the horrors that are out there that we need to protect ourselves from. And it's also a reminder of all the great people who sacrificed during that whole horrific event. So, good night.